All right, suit up and strap in because we are back with another episode of The Deep Dive. So, last episode we were talking about the process that ODST troopers have to undergo when arriving at their new unit. Discussing how that process looks for the new trooper, it's now time to turn our eyes to the command. Senior NCOs, squad leaders, what is required on their end to ensure a stable transition for the new trooper, who, frankly, is going to be around what are now fellow ODSTs for the first time after completing that grueling year-long training. Lot to get into, right?
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are strapping in for a deep dive. We're looking at leadership doctrine, drawn from some pretty high-stakes environments, like the highest imaginable. We're analyzing a specialized military field guide, specifically the ODST field manual. And our focus, it's on that really crucial, potentially dangerous process of integrating new people into an already elite unit. This isn't your standard onboarding, you know? It's about taking these incredibly capable, autonomous operators and making them function instantly as a team.
Yeah, and it's interesting because while the source material talks about, specialized shock troopers, and it calls them the rarest human resource in the UNSC.
Yeah.
Autonomous, disciplined killers.
Wow.
There's quite a description. The principles behind how you integrate them, they're actually universally applicable, really, to any leadership challenge where you've got to rapidly bring high-performing, independent talent into the fold. This deep dive, it's essentially a shortcut, a way to understand high-stakes team development where, let's be honest, failure could mean catastrophic mission compromise.
Right. And that's the core mission for us today, understanding the commander's role in this rapid integration. How do you take these exceptionally talented, very independent individuals and merge them into a team quickly without committing that one sin the doctrine really warns against crushing their initiative?
Exactly. The manual is really explicit about that core paradox leaders face.
Yeah.
You can't smother initiative, but you also can't permit chaos. It's a fine line.
A real tightrope walk.
Totally. And every new trooper, when they walk in, they're both this huge potential asset, but also, crucially, a liability. Until they're battle-proven, anyway.
So the leader's role goes way beyond just tactics, then?
Oh, definitely. The source material, it defines the leader's job as more than just tactical authority. They call a commander a curator of performance. Think about that. You're curating human capital, yeah, but specifically making sure that individuals' sharp edge stays intact, while also guaranteeing they fit perfectly into how the unit operates. And that takes a very highly structured approach.
Okay, let's look at that structure. Starting even before the trooper arrives, right? The first phase seems to be all about intelligence gathering. It's administrative, psychological. Command reviews this really detailed dossier packet. And it sounds like more than just ticking boxes. It's a proper human deep dive.
It really is. It's an investigation, into their capacity, their character. Of course, they track the standard stuff, performance metrics like marksmanship, reaction time, tactical decision-making. But let's focus on two specialized metrics. These translate perfectly, I think, to high-stakes civilian leadership, too. First is zero-G adaptability. Now, in a military context, that means quickly adjusting to weird, non-standard environments, physically. But in business or maybe engineering, you could read this as the ability to adapt to, say, rapid tech shifts or unexpected market changes without your performance tanking.
That translation is really helpful. So it's not literally about floating in space. It's about agility when things get tough or weird.
Exactly. Agility under duress.
Okay, and the second specialized metric, this one really jumped out at me. The assessment of moral flexibility under duress. That sounds incredibly hard to measure. Like, how do you even judge that? What are commanders looking for?
This is maybe the most nuanced psychological filter they use. They're looking for operators who can navigate those really murky ethical gray zones without freezing up, without suffering decision paralysis. It's not about finding people who are immoral, not at all. It's about finding people with the judgment to make an ethically ambiguous call if it serves the bigger mission's success. Even if it means bending a strict rule from the textbook, versus someone who just rigidly follows orders that might actually lead to mission failure.
Okay. So they need decisiveness even when the choices are bad.
Right. The leader needs to know, will this trooper freeze or will they pivot when they're faced with, two bad options?
So the commander's really trying to predict how much they can trust this person's individual judgment, especially when comms are down and they're out there on their own. Beyond those metrics, though, the document mentions instructor remarks. Why are those so important compared to, say, the hard performance data?
Well, because the hard data, like a marksmanship score, That just tells you what they can do. The instructor remarks. They reveal how the person behaved while learning. They might show potential volatility or how they handled sustained stress, maybe even early leadership signs before you've even met them. So the commander has to take all this intel, annotate it with their own initial thoughts, their expectations, and prepare a provisional role for the newcomer. But, and this is stressed over and over, they must stay open to changing that because the profile on paper isn't the actual person standing in front of you.
Okay, makes sense. You've got the profile, the commander knows who's coming. Now, the manual warns about the reception. A disorganized arrival signals weak leadership, right? It can poison the tone from the get-go. So how does the unit actually prepare? Physically, procedurally, to avoid that?
Yeah, this is all about setting up what the manual calls the gravity field of your authority. It's about communicating competence before you even speak. The steps are pretty meticulous. First, there's the mentor system. You assign a senior trooper, someone who's not just professional but has deep reserves of patience. The new trooper needs to be accelerated, not made fun of during this initial phase.
That patience sounds critical, especially when you're dealing with, highly competitive top-tier individuals. And the team briefing seems vital too, explicitly calling the new trooper an investment, not some outsider the team just has to put up with.
Exactly. It sets the internal frame for the whole unit, avoids that immediate us versus them friction. Plus, there's the readiness review. Physically, are their quarters ready? Is their gear logged? Training assets prepped? And then, crucially, procedural readiness. This means reviewing things like brevity codes and squad-level SOPs, standard operating procedures.
Brevity codes. For listeners maybe not familiar, those are like shared jargon, shortcuts for critical communication.
Pretty much. Specialized language, industry nomenclature, just quick ways to pass vital info under pressure. Reviewing these before the new person arrives means the team is already speaking the right language clearly. It helps the newcomer assimilate faster with less confusion.
So all this prep work leads up to that critical initial meeting. The manual lays out a really concise 4-step interaction. It's designed to establish authority and respect right away. Can you walk us through those steps? What are they trying to achieve psychologically?
It's very deliberate, very efficient. Step 1, a clear, concise introduction. Who the commander is, what their role is. Step 2, outlining crystal clear, non-negotiable expectations for the detachment. Things like punctuality, honesty, discipline. Basic stuff, but stated up front.
Okay, sounds a bit like standard management talk so far, but step 3, that's where it feels different. The statement of intent. The commander frames the whole relationship using this really powerful quote mentioned in the manual.
Yeah. My job is to make sure you live long enough to become someone else's mentor.
Wow, that's not a threat, is it? Or even an order. It's like a promise of protective authority. It frames the commander as like a necessary filter for survival and growth. Puts the trooper's performance in the context of their future legacy, not just the immediate task.
Precisely. It aims to get buy-in based on survival, yes, but also on mutual professional growth. It sets a very specific tone. And step 4, simple. Immediate dismissal to the NCO, the non-commissioned officer, for all the procedural details. So the commander establishes the authority, defines the vision, and then delegates the logistical nuts and bolts, reinforces the chain of command, avoids getting bogged down in admin.
Okay, so that initial meeting sets the tone, but actually leading these highly autonomous people day to day, that needs a different approach than traditional top-down management, surely. The ODST doctrine is pretty clear. These are mature Marines, as it says, who really push back against micromanagement. How do you lead without controlling every single step?
Well, you lead through context and delegation, which really boils down to issuing intent, not just orders. An order is prescriptive, right? Go point A, do action B. Intent is more contextual. It's like, okay, the enemy holds the bridge. Our goal is to secure the forward sector so the main force can get through. The fire team leader then knows why the task matters. That lets them shape how they actually execute it based on what's happening on the ground, which can change moment to moment.
But giving that much autonomy, that must be nerve-wracking for a leader. Especially when failure could be, well, fatal. Doesn't the commander feel intense pressure to jump in if they see a trooper struggling during a complex drill, for example? How does the doctrine handle letting failure happen as part of learning?
That's a great question. The doctrine definitely recognizes that friction, even failure, is necessary for growth. But it has to be controlled friction. The commander has to trust the initial screening process, trust the training they've received. If they've done their homework, that intelligence gathering we talked about, they know the trooper can't perform, fundamentally. So the trust is placed in the process itself. If you jump in too early, every time, What you're teaching is dependency, not adaptability. The real leadership challenge isn't stopping the failure. It's being so incredibly clear about the intent that the trooper can self-correct when they realize, okay, what I'm doing right now isn't actually moving us towards the goal.
Self-correction based on clear intent. Okay. Beyond the operational side, the manual also demands some serious psychological awareness from the commander. It notes that these troopers often mask fatigue behind sarcasm. How do you possibly monitor morale subtly when your team is basically trained to hide any weakness?
You have to learn to read between the lines. Read what they don't say. And critically, figure out what their sarcasm is actually aimed at. Is it outward? Like joking about how tough the mission is? That can be healthy, a coping mechanism. Or is it aimed inward? At themselves? Or maybe at the unit structure? Or even leadership? That's a red flag. Other signs of fatigue could be overly cynical jokes, maybe taking slightly more risks than usual in drills, or just a noticeable drop in the usual banter and chatter.
The commander is essentially looking for behavioral shifts. Any deviation from the baseline that might signal, potential stress fractures, they almost become amateur psychologists tracking mood right alongside performance metrics.
And underpinning this whole system is integrity. Never bluff competence, the manual warns. It argues that these troopers can spot false confidence faster than gunfire. In an environment packed with experts admitting you don't know something, that seems like a really radical kind of strength. It absolutely is. That vulnerability, admitting I don't have the answer right now, but balancing it with obvious competence in your core command functions, that actually builds far more trust than pretending to know everything. It sets a tone, honest, transparent. It implicitly gives permission for the troopers themselves to admit their own mistakes without fearing instant judgment or ridicule.
And that integrity directly informs the command tone. The manual offers a really powerful idea here. The unit should fear your disappointment, not your anger.
Yeah, that's key. Command is respect earned through action, through competence, not fear of getting yelled at. This means the commander has to maintain total composure, speaking calmly even when things are chaotic, never adding emotional heat to an already hot situation. And the physical example is non-negotiable too. The manual's blunt. First into the breach, last out of the trench. You have to physically share the risk if you expect their respect.
Wow. And the feedback rule seems critical too, especially managing these competitive egos. It praise in public, correct in private.
Absolutely fundamental. Humiliation breeds resentment. It crushes initiative. You just don't do it. The only tiny exception to the private correction rule is if a mistake reveals a lesson so critical for the entire team's safety that everyone needs to understand it right now. But even then, the correction has to be framed carefully, as an operational lesson learned, not a personal attack on someone's character. Discipline has to preserve that professional relationship, always.
That leads us neatly into accountability and this really intensive structured oversight period, the 90-day filter. The leader is described as the unit's first and final filter before they see live combat. Why mandate a weekly performance file for 3 whole months? Seems like a lot of paperwork.
It is a lot, but the 90-day period is seen as the minimum time needed for any initial performance masking. Someone putting on a good front to start breaking down under sustained pressure and observation. So that weekly file, yeah, it's intense admin oversight, but it's considered necessary triage. And they're looking beyond just simple success metrics. The file includes competency checks, like how quickly do they execute zero-G transitions, which again translates to how fast do they adapt to sudden environmental shifts. It includes checks on armor maintenance discipline, attention to detail, peer reviews crucially, how well are they actually integrating with the team socially and operationally, and of course those critical psychological notes.
So the commander is like a performance auditor, specifically hunting for those stress fractures or maladaptation you mentioned. What would be a major red flag in that psychological note section?
Any significant deviation from a standard healthy stress response. Things like excessive risk-taking in training, maybe avoidance of participating in certain drills, or suddenly becoming very isolated from the team. The commander is vetting for stability, resilience, not just raw skill. And the consequence of getting this wrong, the manual lays it out very soberly. Failure to detect weakness now means the field will do it for you fatally. There's a moral imperative there. The commander has to protect the unit from a weak link and also protect the new trooper from their own undetected flaws before they face real combat.
Okay, this structure is exactly the kind of breakdown our learner audience loves, high-stakes assessment laid out step by step. Let's dissect this 120-day crucible. It's called the definitive timeline for rapid assimilation.
Yeah, this is really the operational core of the manual's integration strategy. It's broken down into 4 distinct phases, each designed to progressively ramp up the pressure and the level of observation.
Okay, phase 1, the first 72 hours. Orientation and composure check. It starts immediately with small accountability tasks, assigning minor duties, watch rotation, cleaning the armory. Sounds like it's about instilling routine right away.
Exactly right. It's not really about the workload itself. It's about observation from moment 1. The commander is assessing demeanor, posture, how they speak, eye contact. Are they projecting what the manual calls quiet confidence, which is good, or arrogance? Arrogance is explicitly called poison to cohesion in the text, because it suggests they're unwilling to learn, unwilling to admit they might be wrong sometimes.
Okay, interesting distinction. Quiet confidence versus arrogance. And the very first test they face is a low-stress simulated drop drill. Given the high stakes, why start with something low stress?
Because the explicit goal here, right at the beginning, is not testing their reflexes or physical skills. Those are basically assumed. They wouldn't be there otherwise. What they are testing is composure and procedural recall under just minimal pressure. So when the countdown starts, the lights change. Does the trooper's voice shake? Are there fine motor skills, buckling a strap, flipping a switch? Are they smooth or jerky? How quickly do they mentally transition from the simulation starting to focusing on the next immediate task? It's like a baseline measure of their cognitive resilience. How do they handle just routine procedural stress?
Fascinating. It's like a diagnostic check. See how the hardware handles a simulated load before you push it harder? Okay, then things move quickly into phase 2. Days 4 to 14. Acclimation and shadowing. This sounds like where the real synchronization begins, physically and conceptually.
Yeah, this is the muscle memory phase, you could say. It kicks off with pair drills, buddy bounding, moving undercover together, room clearing techniques, cover switch synchronization, learning to move seamlessly with a partner. They're literally learning to move like a single organism, relying totally on the predictable movement of their buddy. They have to achieve that physical flow state together.
And at the same time, they're broadening their understanding, shadowing their fire team leader, learning how their small detachment fits into the bigger picture, the whole naval command structure. They need to grasp the strategic why.
Absolutely. If they only understand their tiny piece of the puzzle, their local task, they can't effectively exercise initiative when conditions on the ground inevitably change. They need to see the whole chessboard, not just their square. And then by day 14, they face a micro-leadership test. They have to lead a very short drill, maybe call out targets during a simulated patrol. The commander isn't just evaluating the clarity of their instructions, but their confidence in giving directions to peers they've only known for, 2 weeks.
Okay, building blocks. Then phase 3 hits, and the temperature goes way up. Days 15 to 60. Evaluation and controlled failure. This is full integration now, starting with rotating them through every single battlefield specialty.
That's right, breacher, marksman, grenadier, scout. They cycle through all of them. This does 2 things. Helps identify where they might be optimally placed long-term, but also ensures everyone has a basic multi-role capability for emergencies. But the really critical function of this phase is observing their stress response patterns under pressure. When things go wrong unexpectedly, does the trooper tend to freeze up? Do they get tunnel vision, or do they adapt quickly?
And this leads directly to what you called the critical management tool of the whole doctrine.
Yeah.
Deliberately introducing controlled failure scenarios. Things like ambush drills that go wrong, simulated comms failures, maybe unexpected environmental hazards like simulated toxins. Why is inviting failure so key to assessing these elite troops?
This is probably the most profound insight in the entire manual, I think. It states it really plainly. The ODST does not measure success. It measures recovery. Think about it. Initial success in a drill could just be luck, right? Or maybe they had superior firepower in the simulation, or the plan was just perfect. But recovery after a simulated catastrophic failure that is pure, trained skill and adaptability in action. If they panic and freeze when the simulated ambush hits, well, they fail that assessment. But if they immediately restructure, figure out backup comms, re-engage the problem effectively, they pass. Recovery is the only metric that truly proves resilience and the ability to function decentrally when things fall apart.
That completely reframes the goal of elite training, doesn't it? It's not about achieving perfection. It's about being relentlessly functional when things are guaranteed to go wrong eventually. And to keep this intense process on track, the commander has to maintain those bi-weekly private feedback sessions.
Correct. Absolutely essential. The trooper needs a dedicated, safe outlet to voice any grievances, maybe offer self-critiques on their performance, and even give their own psychological assessment of how their integration is going. This ensures the whole thing isn't just a top-down, potentially punitive process. It makes it feel more like a mutual professional development conversation, even amidst all the pressure.
Okay, moving into the final stretch. Phase 4, days 61 to 120. Cohesion and succession proofing. How do you test team chemistry beyond just synchronized movement and drills? How do you test the deeper bonds?
You test it through sustained duress. The manual calls for fire team endurance exercises. These are long-duration mock missions, often with minimal sleep, minimal resupply allowed. Managing fatigue together under pressure, it naturally breaks down those purely professional barriers and reveals the true team dynamics. How do they support each other when exhausted and stressed? This is also when they introduce moral fatigue drills, scenarios deliberately designed with highly ambiguous ethical gray zones.
So these moral gray zone drills, they're directly testing that initial psychological assessment. The moral flexibility under duress thing we talked about earlier. They're seeing if the trooper sticks to the mission doctrine, the unit's values, even when resources are scarce, and maybe the easiest path is the ethically questionable one.
Exactly. It's testing their initiative versus their judgment, all under extreme stress. And then finally comes the ultimate test, the command dependency assessment. In these scenarios, the leadership is simulated as being neutralized. The commander is killed or rendered incapable during the exercise. The critical question is, can the remaining ODSTs seamlessly continue the mission? Can they reorganize on the fly, maintain focus? That ability to function effectively without a central head, that's the real hallmark of a successfully integrated and genuinely succession-proof unit.
Wow. So after this whole 120-day crucible, there's a final report. And it determines their fate. Full operational status, maybe needs more training, or potentially reassignment. It sounds like a very structured, very data-driven decision. Not much room left for just subjective feelings about whether someone is competent.
That's the intention. Minimize subjectivity, maximize objective assessment under realistic stress, maintaining unit identity and managing friction. But, integration isn't just about ticking boxes on a 120-day timeline. It's also a continuous investment in the unit's culture. The manual really stresses that building a cohesive detachment requires creating a shared identity, and that's something leaders have to proactively construct.
Okay, but how do you intentionally build a shared identity among these, highly independent individuals, people who probably already see themselves as the best of the best?
You do it through shared experience, yes, but also through deliberate traditions. These can manifest in simple things sometimes, like symbolic unit patches they all wear, reciting a unit motto before drops, maybe unique rituals specific to that detachment when they deploy. These seemingly small cultural things, they act as anchors. They build solidarity, a sense of belonging, especially in what's often a very chaotic and dangerous environment.
And crucially, the manual emphasizes being open about failure. Hosting these after-action reviews, AARs, where mistakes get discussed openly by everyone, that feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? Especially for high achievers with big egos.
It can feel that way, but it's absolutely essential for building trust. The AAR normalizes failure, not as something to hide, but as a collective teaching opportunity. The focus is always on what failed in the system or the process, not who failed personally. That way, tactical errors get turned into structured lessons for everyone, without assigning blame or shame. It keeps the trust intact.
And to keep things stable in this pressure cooker atmosphere, the manual mentions the importance of shared humor, like controlled irreverence. They need an emotional outlet.
Oh, definitely. A pressure valve is crucial. You need that controlled irreverence to keep morale from cratering under constant stress. The leader also needs to foster informal leadership. Allow trusted veterans to mentor newer guys, but without letting them overstep the formal rank structure. This helps pass on that critical, often unwritten knowledge and experience while still maintaining the integrity of the official hierarchy.
Now, given that these troopers are inherently competitive, friction between team members seems inevitable. How does command deal with interpersonal conflict quickly, before it starts to erode cohesion and creates what the manual calls an operational fracture?
Yeah, conflict resolution needs to be swift and decisive. The protocol described is pretty rigid. It's usually two-man conflict resolutions, held behind closed doors, no witnesses. It has to be fast, confidential, and kept strictly professional. The main goal is to separate tactical disagreements, which can actually be valuable, leading to better ideas from purely personal grievances, which are just toxic to the team.
Okay, but what happens if the conflict involves a senior trooper? And let's say that senior trooper is clearly in the wrong. How does the commander handle that without totally undermining the senior rank's authority in front of everyone?
That's a tough one. But the manual is clear. The leader must enforce fairness visibly. It actually states that correcting a senior trooper publicly, when they are objectively wrong, earns more respect from the entire unit in the long run. Why? Because it reinforces the principle that the standards, the rules, they apply equally to everyone, regardless of rank or tenure. The ultimate leadership goal here is channeling all that aggressive energy, that competitiveness, into mission focus. You have to prevent suppressed resentment from festering, because that's what leads to those dangerous long-term operational fractures.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about advanced development. The leader's job doesn't just stop when the 120-day integration crucible is over, right? They have to keep pushing, enforce training continuity.
Absolutely. It's about repetition until skills become instinct. That means things like weekly drop drills, constant reinforcement of core procedures, regular marksmanship evaluations, and mandated combat medical refreshers. The manual stresses that every ODST must be a proficient field medic. They need to be functionally interchangeable in a crisis situation. One man down shouldn't cripple the team's medical capability.
And the manual also requires something called cognitive stress testing, exposure to things like high decibel noise, high heat environments, or maybe confined space training. Why intentionally subject these elite operators to physical discomfort that doesn't seem to directly mimic actual combat?
It's about training the mind to stay calm and focused when the physical environment itself becomes hostile or overwhelming. Think of it like the military equivalent of, I don't know, forcing a project manager to deliver a critical financial report in a room that's overcrowded, overheated, and maybe the projector keeps failing. It enhances their composure in the field by making them habituated to managing sensory overload while still needing to perform complex cognitive tasks like making tactical decisions or communicating clearly.
Right, building resilience to environmental stressors, not just enemy fire. And finally, there's that forward-looking duty, cultivating future leaders, sponsoring long-term development, encouraging specialization in things like demolition or tactical comms. The manual reminds them, you are not just preparing killers, you are cultivating future leaders.
Exactly. Force multipliers have to come from within the unit itself. If the current commander isn't actively developing the next generation of leaders, the unit's long-term effectiveness, its longevity, is seriously compromised. This focus on succession planning is baked right into the ODST mission and ethos. Stress, discipline, and failure management.
Okay, this high-pressure environment, it inevitably takes a toll. Human costs like stress and burnout seem unavoidable. But since these troopers are trained to mask fatigue, how does a commander actually recognize those subtle signs? The shifts indicating someone might be reaching their breaking point.
Yeah, the signs are usually subtle, often reversals of their established character or baseline behavior. The manual points to things like silence where there was sarcasm, or maybe sloppiness where there was precision. A sudden lack of attention to detail in gear prep, for instance. Or maybe a sudden detachment during informal times, like in the mess hall, just seeming off or withdrawn. These are the kinds of telltale signs that suggest their cognitive shield, their resilience, might be starting to drop.
And when those subtle signs do appear, the immediate protocol seems key. It's not about launching an investigation, is it? It's more like an intervention.
That's right. The protocol mandates pulling the trooper from any high-risk duties immediately for at least 48 hours. Give them a chance to decompress. And then conduct a short, informal interview. The manual is really specific here. It says, this is not an interrogation. The commander is just checking in, validating the stress the trooper might be feeling, trying to identify the source of the potential fracture. Is it mission stress? Personal issues? The whole approach prioritizes the trooper's well-being and aims to preserve the asset, the person, for long-term utility. It's about recovery, not punishment.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to the disciplinary framework. When actual correction is needed, fairness and consistency are stressed as paramount. How is the framework tiered? Based on how serious the infraction is.
It's pretty clear. Tier 1 infractions are minor things. Lateness, maybe a minor oversight with equipment maintenance. These are typically handled locally by the squad leader, often with some corrective physical training PT. It's quick, low-level course correction, meant to reinforce standards without a huge fuss. Tier 2 infractions are more serious. They usually involve a formal reprimand for dereliction of duty, like maybe a significant safety lapse during a training drill that could have had consequences.
In Tier 3, that must be reserved for the really serious stuff.
Yeah, Tier 3 is for acts of disobedience or behavior that directly compromises the mission or puts other team members in danger. It signifies a fundamental lack of adherence to core discipline. This kind of infraction necessitates a full command review. And honestly, it often leads to the trooper being reassigned out of the detachment entirely, because it indicates a fundamental breakdown of operational trust.
That concept keeps coming up. Operational trust. That really seems to be the core principle behind the discipline, doesn't it? It's not just about punishment for its own sake. It's about maintaining the unit's absolute faith in every single member.
Precisely. It boils down to this. Can every other member of the team trust that this person will cover their flank during a chaotic zero-G transition? Can they trust them to maintain proper radio procedure under fire? If the answer is no, the team structure itself fails. So the discipline isn't just punitive, it's preservative. It ensures that the operational ecosystem, that web of trust, remains viable and strong.
And finally, we have to talk about the inevitability of mistakes. Human error happens even among the absolute best. The manual suggests leadership isn't judged by avoiding failure entirely, but by how they handle the recovery afterward. And it demands command accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The leader has to take ownership, publicly, for command-level errors. If their plan was flawed, if their call led to a tactical failure in training or operations, they have to admit it instantly and accept the consequences. The doctrine uses strong language. ODSTs respect leaders who bleed accountability. That willingness to be vulnerable, to admit fault, it actually builds tremendous loyalty and reinforces the idea that everyone is accountable.
And in that failure, that mistake, it's immediately turned into a teaching tool. The manual uses a pretty stark phrase. Nothing teaches like embarrassment under safe conditions.
Yeah, it's blunt, but the idea is powerful. Failure becomes the raw material for the next training scenario. You don't need to invent abstract problems anymore. The unit just needs to practice solving the exact problem that almost caused them to fail.
Yeah.
And the trooper who made the mistake, if they own it, learn from it, and demonstrate they've recovered and adapted, they actually become more valuable. Because now they possess that vital, hard-won experience that might help the unit survive when the real situation occurs. They're the one who won't repeat that specific mistake under fire. So after all that, what does this all mean? We've really dissected this specialized ODST doctrine today, from that initial intense psychological deep dive on recruits all the way through to the command dependency assessment that caps off the 120-day crucible. It's clear this process isn't just a collection of good ideas or helpful advice. It's presented as a rigid, almost mandatory doctrine for achieving excellence in these units. And the proof really is in that structure. The manual actually culminates in a final 10-step integration checklist. Covers everything from the initial dossier review right up to that final operational sign-off after 120 days. And it explicitly states that skipping steps, maybe trying to save time, be more efficient, is actually considered dereliction, not efficiency. That strict adherence to the process is seen as fundamental to guaranteeing operational readiness in these kinds of high-stakes fields.
And this meticulous system is designed to ensure decentralized success. There's that vivid field example mentioned, Operation Iron Veil, where a corporal who'd only been integrated for about 100 days managed to seamlessly restructure command and push through the objective after a squad leader was suddenly lost to enemy fire.
Right. And that successful adaptation, the manual argues, wasn't just luck. It was a direct result of a commander who had rigorously enforced contingency drills, who had deliberately built decentralized authority throughout that whole 120-day integration process. That is the definition of succession-proof leadership they're aiming for. The ultimate metric of command, according to this doctrine, is actually measured by how little the team collapses without them.
Wow. So the entire system is built to forge operators who are fundamentally self-sufficient, capable of keeping it together, maintaining cohesion, pushing the mission forward, even if the command structure gets shattered by casualties or communication loss. It really feels like the immense weight of command distilled down into actionable human principles.
It really does. And that profound psychological burden, the responsibility of command, it's summarized so beautifully, I think, in the closing line of the ODST Leadership Creed that's quoted in the material. It serves as this constant reminder of the leader's primary psychological function, maybe even above pure tactical genius. It says, in the silence before drop, your troopers will listen for your breathing, make sure it's steady. That sense of calm, that steady presence radiated by the leader, even when everything feels like it's about to fall apart. That's ultimately the foundation of all the trust and cohesion they've worked so hard to build.
You know, there was a lot of great stuff we chatted about today. Really. Well, for anyone just tuning in for the first time, we are a bi-weekly podcast, and all through the rest of this month, we will be talking and discussing anything and everything ODST. Well, that said, It's been really interesting to see both sides of the integration and acceptance of these freshly trained troopers and the institutional care that goes into their adoption into a new unit. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you'll come back again for another deep dive. Next episode, Battlefield Tactics.